Sharing a screen option. Can you stop sharing?
Okay, you're not seeing.
Okay. Hi everyone. Myself Mathu. So as Bharat mentioned, so I'll be walk through on the custom metrics today. So before we further going on, so I'll just go back to the agenda. So today I'll try to walk through on what is exactly the custom metrics and what are the different options that we have that will help us to configure this Anypoint custom metrics, and we'll walk through with a small use case, and we'll start building up a small build code, and then we'll deploy and we'll test this activity. So now, prerequisite. So if we are looking forward for custom metrics, so we need to have any point monitoring permissions, and we need to have a Titanium subscription for us to use this capability. And with respect to the cloud up runtime, so we have access to deploy or manage applications, and hybrid runtimes also we can use these prerequisites. And for monitoring configuration, so as we discussed, we need to enable this configuration for us to use the custom metrics. And here we have three different types of options that we can use. One is updating the data directly in the runtime manager, or we can update this data in any point monitoring. I'll walk through on these options. So I'll uh, go through this step-by-step process. And we have one more option of CI/CD pipeline. So this is the trusted and most suggested way that we suggest every developer to go ahead and use this option by updating in the CI/CD pipeline within the Maven form. And with hybrid implementations, we required our install an agent for us to use this capability. Now, here configuration, we need to update this property where it will help us to enable analytics details, and which will push the data to our anypoint monitoring. I'll discuss more about where it is stored and how it happens in the backend. And this is a second option, so where we can do this in the cloud app. So I'm just trying to go back. So I'll go to anypoint monitoring, and here from settings. So if you go to the settings, once we deploy our applications, so we can see what are your applications which are deployed. So you need to manually enable or disable your custom metrics. So once it is enabled, by default, your metrics from your application will pass through to this monitoring. And by default, CloudUp 2.0 will have this feature. And for hybrid, as we are discussing, so if anyone wants to install this, so we need to come navigate to endpoint monitoring to hybrid. From here, you need to select whichever the environment that you want to, and post that you need to download this zip file, and you need to install it in your server and restart. And so mostly it will take like 5 to 10 minutes for us to get this installation set up. And post that, by default, all your data from your application will go through your runtime manager. uh, from your runtime manager, it will go through your back analytics. So we'll discuss how exactly it happens. So once we install, we also need to have some code configurations in the code that will help us to push these metrics. And similar to the runtime fabric, by default, it will be enabled for there. Now I'll go back to the presentation mode.
Madhu, can you maximize your screen? I think.
Yeah, sure. For code, I'll go through.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next option that we were discussing about from CI/CD pipeline. So we'll request, so whenever we are setting up our new application and within the Maven configuration, make sure to update this analytic agent enabled by true. And for our reference, we have updated as true, but we'll suggest to pull it from your pipeline, from your property file. And then, so same hybrid, we have this option to get it install your chip. Now, so as we are discussing more about custom metrics, I just wanted to have few points. So now today, when we talk about custom metrics and how utilizing these flow components inside your app through your Anypoint monitoring. So this will help us to show the KPIs inside your Anypoint platform, as well as some operational capabilities that we can leverage with this custom metrics. Now, how these custom metrics are designed, and within the code how we'll do this, we'll go through step by step process. Now, so when we are talking about custom metrics, what exactly it does? So it will try to save the data that you have pushed to through your connector and send these operational or business metrics to your endpoint monitoring. Now, so I have one example in the diagram which will help you to understand more. And in the backend, so what are the data that we are pushing through our custom metrics connector? It will go and store this in InfluxDB, and from that DB, MuleSoft will use Grafana from the backend to display uh, the dashboards. So I think Dixit, so you got the Kibana, right? So I think similarly to the Kibana, so MuleSoft will use backend Grafana to display the custom metrics data from that is getting pulled from our InfluxDB. Now, so these metrics are real time and can be track the data in the real time data. So once we have the data running in the pipeline, we can see this with a near real time, we would say. So with few seconds of delay, you can see the data coming and reflecting there. Now you can utilize send custom metrics information. Now, as we discussed, so we need a Titanium subscription. Now, so as we are talking about initializing custom metrics, we'll try to deep dive on what are the different options that we have here. So whenever we creating a custom metrics, we need a different data for us to create this metrics. One is a metric collection name. So with respect to the metric collection name, this should be unique with the metric name that we are designing. And so these events are grouped together into collections. As we are discussing, these data will go and sit in your database. So we these metric name that we are initializing, these are grouped together into collections, and each collection will contain that series of events. So all the data that we are pushing out backend, it will be stored in the series of events. So whenever the event got triggered, that timestamp will be taken care and stored in the backend. Now, so the next one is metric timestamp. So as we are discussing, this represents the time of the event when the object is created. So the collection name and the event time are together and store this in the backend DB. And now for this collection, we have two different items. One is dimensions and one is facts. So these dimensions are representing your actual data. Like let's say if you are trying to create a custom metrics to store an order data, so it could be order ID or location, or it could be a failure reason, anything. These all will be coming under your dimensions. We'll walk through a couple of examples in the next slide. And these can be anything alphanumeric, and but there are a couple of restrictions on using special characters here. And coming to the facts, these will be values will be numerical all the time, and these could be order count. Let's say we have stored certain data, and if you want to pull out certain data, we use these facts to put out a condition. So if I can give you more detailed explanation. So as we mentioned, we are storing all this information in our database, right? So it's like combination of our queries. So for us to write these queries, so we use facts like a where queries, and your table names or column names would be your dimensions. We can represent that way. And so while we are creating custom metrics dashboard, I'll try to put out more detailed information there. Now, while we are creating the custom metrics, there are a couple of best practices that are suggested for us to create while we are working on this metrics. Now, as we are discussed, so all the data that we are storing in will be initiated in the backend based on the time frame. So let's consider you created a metric now, and if you're trying to pull it for every 1 minute versus if you are pulling the data for 1 hour versus the data that you're pulling for 1 day, it makes a difference in the backend. So the more the refresh rate that it is, the more impact it will be going to happen on your database search. So we suggest while you're trying to fetch the data, try to put out more higher like hourly basis or a day basis to give you accurate information than pulling the data regularly. And refresh frequency, I think this is the refresh frequency that we are talking. This determines how often your chart refresh. So there is an option where by default, if you enable this option, your chart will keep on refreshing the data from your database, and it will keep on pulling the data from your database in the backend database. Now, and if the more the refresh rate is, that will impact the performance of your dashboards. And now, as we had discussed about creating dimensions or fact, right? So we need to create low cardinality dimensions. Now, what is could be, right? So as we are discussing about more about order example, right? So let's consider you have an order ID and product ID and location ID. These are unique for every transaction that you are happening. Now, what will happen here is now when you are dealing with low cardinality data, so you will have multiple unique data coming and sitting in your database. Now, if you try to refresh the data from backend, it will impact. So it might not even help us to get real-time data with accurate information. So what it is suggested is, in place of low cardinality data, try to replace with hard cardinality data, high cardinality dimensions. Like so, if you are having a product ID and product ID could be multiple products that you are in, so just try to replace that name with category ID, and you will be having multiple orders. Let's say you will have like hundreds and thousands of orders getting generated. In place of that, try to keep out order count, and based on the order count we can do the remaining transactions, and we'll go through how this will impact and how this will help us to create this. Now, as we are discussing, so we'll go through one example on where exactly this custom metrics can be implemented and how best that we can do. So this example was defined with respect to the API-led connectivity. And so what happens is, let's say a customer X has dealing with three different ERP systems, and he wants to track this data coming from different ERP systems based on the region, and they want to eventually would like to consolidate the data into one. So as they are dealing with multiple ERP systems across, and segregating the data and validating this data became more challenge for them. And orders which are getting generated either from EDI or mobile or different options that they have in. Now, biggest challenge here is sales rep orders are still originating from their ERP UI, and we'll see how best that we can redesign the custom metrics that will help us to demonstrate all this information. Now, before further going on to the code walkthrough, I just got you a sample application which I have created, and where so if I have another image which I thought to show you. Okay, I'll go back. So now here, I'll take one step backward. So if we are going ahead and creating a custom metrics, now we might not be creating this custom metrics data from all these APIs. Let's say here we have around 7 APIs that are getting exposed from MuleSoft. Before we going ahead and creating custom metrics, we need to decide a best place where we will create this information, where the unique data and the common data will come and pass to this. And this example in this demo that we have created, if you see, order papi is the best place for us to get these metrics defined or retrieve this data. Now, wherever we are discussing about custom metrics, we will be defining this data in orders papi. Let's consider if you define this in your system API. So this will impact in creating a duplication of the data, and this is not even helpful for us to keep on creating the custom metrics at all the system layers on the experience areas, because we might impact in creating the duplication of the data, and aggregating the data and creating a common metrics might not be the possible. We might not fulfill this. So that's the reason. So whenever we are going ahead and creating a custom metrics for our application, we need to go ahead and research on what could be the best place where we can get all the data in, and how we can proceed with this. Okay, so thanks for that, and I'll proceed further. And here this example, so consider this is our order papi, and here we are having the data coming from our endpoint MQ. So this will subscribe the data, and it will determine what is the ERP systems that we have, and what are the different customer information that we have, and it will try to process and call different ERP systems that we have. And if any errors are rising, we are directly pushing this to error queue, and we are acknowledging them back. So I'll try to go back to the code and walk through on this. Um, Bharat, is it good? So I try to expand my.
I think it's pretty small.
It's pretty small. Okay, I'll try to. How about now?
No, it's the same, Madhu. Probably you'll have to take it to your desktop, the screen.
Okay, you want? I'll try to reshare once from
Sure.
different screen.
So meanwhile,
No.
anyone has any questions, feel free to ask Madhu now.
How about now, Bharat?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. So if anyone have any questions, I will be happy to answer. If not, we'll continue on this. Okay, we are proceeding further. So so as we discussed, so we have designed one application where it will try to pull the data from our queue. So now, before even further going on, so I have written some logic where it will try to determine what is a ERP system. I have written some common logic to randomly select this, and based on the ERP, we'll decide to call which system, either it is SAP or COD or legacy system. And so as we are dealing with regions, we have created one random data view which will help us to create this regions across. And business groups, these are the couple of business groups that we are expecting. Let's say the client that I'm designing the metrics have these different business which is related to widgets and gadgets across, etc. Now once we have this generated, what we are doing is we are designing to which ERP system, either it is SAP or it is, and we'll process this. If any failure happening, let's say if we have received the request from any other ERP system, we are just raising saying that invalid to ERP, and then whenever we are getting matching errors, then we are going ahead and pushing this to our error queue and processing data and make sure this record will not get reprocessed. We are acknowledging back, and for any other error, we are just acknowledging back and we are not reprocessing this. So this is the existing flow. Let's consider. Now, if you want to implement metrics here, so okay, I need to go back to the screen. Okay, I try to get both into the same screen. Okay. Now, so we'll discuss more about what exactly the problem for the customer have now. So now the customer have designed this application. Now we'll discuss about two use cases. One use case is now we have created a story for the sprint planning, but the integration team is looking for the ways to charge back to the MuleSoft vCore cost back to the business. So now business is there is a huge cost on the vCores based on number of process, and they are not able to gather certain information that might help them. Now there are a couple of options that have already been discussed, but with API-led structure, it has been decided that custom metrics is the way to go. Now we'll go ahead and create a custom matrix that stores the count and the total order value for the each order processed through MuleSoft. Now after that, we'll group all these values by region and business unit. Then we'll display this data. Now why custom matrix? So now as we are discussing about where exactly we are going to implement this custom matrix, this is the where the process API will be the best place for us to pull this data, since it is the location versus looking at ERP data from three different sources. That's where we'll discuss. Now, as we are discussing, before I further go ahead and create this metrics data in the code, so I wanted to show you how exactly the custom metrics in the backend works. So earlier we have discussed about dimensions and facts, right? So this is my metric name, which is order metrics, and dimensions are business groups and geo regions, and facts are order count and order amount. Now, let's say if I created metric one, so this is coming from a different flow. This is coming from a different flow. Let's consider you have metric one, two, three, four, five different data. So these all data will aggregated and go and store in this. This is how actually the matrix representation will be. Now I'll go back to the application. So, but able to see my screen, right? Yeah. Okay, so within here, so now as we are discussing about creating the custom metrics, now I'll go ahead and create one. Now, for us to have this custom metrics, we need to go through Exchange and get this Anypoint custom metrics connector from the Exchange and post that. Now, we have different options to go ahead and design where exactly we want to create the custom metrics. Now, for this use case, we'll use one metric while every transaction is successful, and one matrix which is expected invalid ERP or invalid address. These cases, we create one metric, and for any other errors, we'll create another metric. So when we are creating this metric, so let's consider we'll create this metric as chargeback for reference, and we need to create the dimensions, right? So the dimensions that we have discussed earlier, one is your business group, and this value is coming from, I think, start business group, right? So the business group is determined in the ERP and other business groups, right? So this is the one value that we are pushing, and other is the location, which is geo region. And for this, the value could be geo region. Yeah, perfect. So now we have created dimensions for this. For any query to work, so facts are mandatory. At least we need to create one fact. So if consider you don't want to push multiple facts, at least we need to create one fact saying that either order count or count, whatever it could be the name, and you need to push value as one. So as mentioned, these facts could be only numeric, and dimensions could be alphanumeric. And for us, we'll be creating one fact called order count, and this value, as we discussed, I'll be creating one default value. And now, as we were discussing about order amount, so this is where we can create multiple, uh, pull the data based on the order amount here. And this order data is coming from order order amount. Okay, this is how actually we created chargeback for the success case. And before that, I'll just take a minute. I have created one application where this will publish the data to queue. And here I have created my own logic where it will generate the order ID, billing address, country, order amount, and fail reason outcome. So this will populate the data and process this and publish to the queue, and our queue will consume this data. Now here we have discussed for success case. Now let's consider for failure case. We'll go ahead and just say for failure case, let me create business uh, business uh, failure, and I'll try to create different dimensions. And here it would be ERP system because where exactly the failure happened, in which ERP it is, and where's dot ERP system. Yeah, system. And then we will track failure reason and failure reason. So we'll come it from error dot error type, and I wanted to take it as string. Now here I'll write a different logic because our error will say either app colon connectivity or app colon HTTP timeout, like that, right? So as we discussed the special characters, if you push any special characters in your flow, it will throw error for us and it won't create metrics for now. So I'll just create an underscore or this one, and for failure, and here we'll track order ID, and this is coming from the payload dot order ID. Now for the failure case, we created few facts, and we'll go ahead and create facts. And for the facts, we'll create the same, but here we'll say fail count, and by default, I'll make it as one. And now, similarly, I'll use order amount, and this is coming from payload dot order amount. Okay, and I have created one for this. What I do is I'll just copy and paste the same, but I will track everything the same, but we'll rename it to different metric. And in place of business errors, I'll just say technical error. Now we have created this flow, and this.
Madhav, just to interrupt, like at string, you need a space, right? In feller region, can you go to expression? Maybe.
So this will not work here. So while creating this data here, we need to put it as dot as string.
Okay.
Only then it is considered. If you keep space as string, it will throw an error because this error type while it is reading it's failing. So that's the reason I have kept it dot as string.
Okay, okay, got it.
I'll go through. I think we can give a try running this as well. Okay. Now we have created all this data. And what I did is I already have deployed this application in Cloud App. And before going into the Cloud Hub, I'll just get that on the screen. Okay. I have application deployed and it's running on, where is this application? Okay. Okay. So before further going on, I just wanted to remove this. Okay. Okay, perfect. So I have my application deployed and I'll be using this Postman to run this data. So what I'll be doing is I'll be getting on the screen. I'm trying to get one load runner. This. So what I'm trying to do is I have created one load runner which will try to run us this data in the backend, and I'll just say I'll make 1,000 iterations and with the delay of 8 seconds, and this will run. Yeah, and now my application is running in the backend. Now I'll go ahead and open this matrix once again. This is successful, right? Okay. I'll just go through this application. So now my application is running and randomly it's trying to create a few successful cases and few failure cases for us. Now, as we discussed, so we'll go to the monitoring, and now I have deployed my application on Sandbox, which is order pack v3 version, v3 version, right? It's v3 version. Now, before further going on, so these are different metrics that we have apart from our custom metrics. And with respect to the mules, when we are going to create the dashboards, we will be having two different types of dashboards. One is built-in dashboards, which will help us to retrieve the data with respect to the application platform performance, how much is the weak code utilization, how many inbound requests are outbound requests, how many are failures. So all these details will be coming under your built-in dashboards. And for now, MuleSoft have around 80 plus metrics in place, which we can leverage. And to that additional, we are going to create custom metrics based on our business requirements. Okay, so now we'll go to the custom metrics, and if you see your application, so we have business order failure metric got created. Now if you see, I think last 1 minute, yeah, so 41 the data is coming in. Now here we need to create the data, right? So as we are discussing, this aggregation will be your facts, and this measurement would be your the data that you have pushed in. So let's consider I want to count number of business failures, and I have pushed out order amount, right? Just bear with me. as mentioned, so we have multiple metrics that MuleSoft provides us, and that will be clubbed with your custom metrics data that we already pushed now. And we have pushed with order amount and order count. I'm just looking for order amount. Now order amount count, I'll just say order amount dot sum, and we will group by fail region. Okay. So now if you see, right, we are grouping on based on fail region. Let's consider we are not grouping out. So here we can see a metric as created for us, saying that there are a couple of failures happen from this matrix we can see. Now let's consider if you want to see more about what kind of reason that you have failed. So these metrics have failed and shows us that there is a app customer not found issue or invalid address or invalid ERP and this way. Okay, and if you see, these are the different values at him. So for invalid ERP, we have 45 requests came in for now, and I'll try to increase the count. It's still running, right? Yeah. So we'll keep on getting this data. Now we were discussing about chargeback to MuleSoft, right? How many order count? For this also we'll create one count, and based on the same order, I'll just, you want me to increase the size? Okay. Okay. How about now? Perfect. Okay. And okay, so I'll just go ahead and push the same order amount, same metric that we have pushed in. I already crossed over. Dot sum. Now, okay. So for the chargeback, the data should get reflected here for this interval. Now, we need to group it either based on the business group or region. That's what our expectations, right? So let's consider for the business groups. These are the different business groups that we have, and we have received these many data. And with respect to region, let's see how many hits that we got and how the data is get separated. So if you see at this interval, we got these many data coming in based on the different region. And based on that, we have for the technical order failure also the data is coming in, sitting in. Now for us to go ahead and create a dashboard, we have two different options. So we can go ahead to custom dashboards, and I'll just open in the new tab. And here you just click on the new dashboard, and either you can create graph and you can start everything from the scratch. This is one of the option. Or as we can see few data, custom metrics data, which is displaying out here, what we can do is you have an option called save as. Now I'll just say ERP system. I'll create one dashboard from here. By default, MuleSoft will help us to create this dashboard in the backend, and all the relevant information will get populated automatically here. Okay, so now we can see the same data, the same query that we have updated here. I think there, if I go here menu, and when you just click on the configure, if you see the business failure that we can see here, the same data, and we should see the same combination of count, order amount, and fail reason. I'll just go back, and here if you see, right, so it says order amount dot sum dot count, and based on the fail reason you're tagging this. So automatically all this data will get created. Now I'll just take a step back. I think earlier we were discussing these metrics will work based on the your database queries, right? This is how exactly it looks like. Now what I do is I'll just go back and create one new metric completely. Sorry, I'll just click on one graph. Now just say mm, custom orders. So whenever we want to create a metric, so we should update this to advanced mode, and within this advanced mode we need to go ahead and search for the custom metrics. And here we can see these are the different metric options that by default Mule supports, and we'll go ahead and select custom metrics. Now we have our environment which is deployed is in sandbox, and let's consider my app ID. which is order v3 is my app id. And let's consider, so if I want to put out more query saying that okay, from where, so from where I should pull this data, let's consider I'll pull out only the metric data which is matching to chargeback. And here, this is your select query. So now from where you want to pull this data, we have updated from where, from the table, whichever the table it is. And like it works in the backend, I don't say a table. This is a metric, and this is where you need to fill and what are the different columns that you want to pull it. So as we are dealing with order amount, I'll search for order amount field. And now, so this order amount, let's consider you sum it out. And this group by would be your combination of the data. Let's consider I'll remove these values and I want to group it based on business group. And this one we need to manually update this. So by the time we just written all this logic, you can see the dashboard got created. Let's consider, I'll just take one step back. So here we can see gadgets and all this are created based on the business group that we have. Let's me remove this logic completely. But if you can see, this is already getting created because you're grouping this based on the business orders, and this business group data is getting pushed to all the metrics that you're currently pushing in. Let's consider I'll do it based on the ERP fail reason. So if you see, when I updated as fail reason, the data did not pop it up because wherever this condition is matching, the fail data was not pushed. Now let's say the fail reason says custom metrics, and for failure we haven't pushed the data as order. So now we should select fail count dot sum and sum. And while we are pushing the failure reasons, just a second, failure, it is on fail reason, yeah. So we have fail reason and just say fail reason. See, yeah, the data will get populated. Now we have updated this graph to show us only the data which is matching to app customer not found. So let's consider I'll remove this reason. Now it should, as per the discussion that we have till now, it should display all the failure reasons for us. So if you see, these are all the failure reasons that we have. Now let's consider if we push this data to graph and the customer can see this information now. But this is a bit challenging for the customer to understand, anyone to understand from this graph, right? What we do is we'll try to change this visualization from lines to bars, and or else I'll just keep lines for now. And here we have additional options that you have. So either you can change the visuals, that how it is pointing and what are the different options that you have. Now here, if you see, we are not able to see how many app customer failures are happened, or how many address failures are happened. So we need to go through like this to just to see at what point happened. So what we can do is, and I just created stack or for and just select, yeah. So I'll just click on total. Now if you see, for that time range of 15 minutes, you have 31 failures have happened for customer not found, and 31 failure have happened for address not found, and 516 for invalid ERP. So that's how actually you can update your metrics data based on the metrics data that you have pushed this data. Now till now we were discussing about only the graphs, right? So let's consider, we'll go ahead and create one table. So for us to create this table, so just a second. Our table data, I'm able to see this, right? Okay, I thought to show you one. So now let's consider if you want to see this in the bar data. So we can just say tag region failure and tag linear. And based on this time interval, we should be getting the data here. Yeah, and I'll just say failure reason is equal to app custom not found. Okay, now if you see, right, so what was happening, you can see only the data that you want within the bars representation or visual representation or points. You can just update with the points as well if you are having huge amount of the data and you want to just pull out the data which is coming from your points representation. Now let's go ahead and create one table as we were discussing, and here I'll just create one table data. Okay, already have one. So I'll just say overall. Here we'll just say overall transaction data. As we mentioned, I'll go to the custom metrics and I'll just select my sandbox, and I'll just go through my app ID and application is this. But here, while we are going further, we don't need to group it based on certain data. I just remove this. So now what happens here is earlier in the graph, we need the data should be grouped across different factors. But here we will not be doing based on that. So what I do is I'll just say amount, uh, order amount dot sum, and then I don't want that, and I'll just add another field, and we were trying to pull out order amount, and then let's say I'll pull out the fail reason, fail reason, uh, fail count, that sum, and then and we have add another field. Let's consider order ID, or so now I will be putting no tag. So if you see, right, so let's consider what are the different fields that we are pushing in. You can select all the fields and we can create this tabular form. So now what was happening here is, so few metrics for success, few metrics are failures, right? So when you're combining the data, you can see the empty input the data. So what you can do is I can add a logic in saying that whenever the failure reason is not equal to empty, I should not have the data. Okay. So we can restrict the data. I think order count is coming in. Order count dot sum. Just give me a second. It should not display here, but it should display here. Okay, perfect. So it's not automatically showing up here for me here. So that's the reason I have manually added. And for now, I'll just remove this. So now here you can see this order ID, all the order IDs that are coming in, and we have seen this data. Now this table, as we are discussing, this metric is coming based on the time frame. So if you see all the data which is getting stored by default, the time frame column will be get added. Now this is a bit challenging for us to understand, and it won't help us to go through the data, right? For this, as we are discussing about bars and access for that, I'll just say average and just say count. Now, you see what happened. So this order IDs, we have 17 orders coming in, and what is some value for this? So there are different ways that you can say, let's say you want to view all this information in columns, or you want to view this information in the rows. So you can change this information like this now. And I'll keep it back to the columns for now. Let's consider you have pulled this data from columns, and you don't want to keep this name, let's say custom metrics.order.sum. So from backend name, what you can do is you can change these names. Let's consider for this order amount.sum, right? I'll just say order amount, and this is number, and we'll consider it as currency as dollars. Now if you see, the value got changed saying that order amount, and the values which we have the collection earlier, it's coming in thousands representation, but it has changed to dollars of thousand representation. And same way we'll try to change for order id. I'll just go ahead and create one and just select custom metrics, and I'll just say order id. Now this is number, and remaining I'll just keep it the same, and by now we should see it have changed the order names. And if there is a possibility that, so the time representation is completely different. What you can do is I'll keep the name same, but here I'll change the type of the date from number to this format. So where we have, by default we have four different formats that we have. You can select any format that matches your representation, and you can create this metric. So now we have gone through creating the metrics and have seen different options that we have, right? I just wanted to show you one different option before. Let's consider business order failures, and let's consider from this graph representation itself, and you wanted to keep a threshold saying that max failures could be like 80. Only after 80 your graph should looks different. That will help us to understand these are more than the expected range of failures that are happening. For an example, so I'll just go ahead and create the threshold and just say value. Here we have 80, right? Let's consider, I'll create a value. So if you see, there are different options within this range, and let's say if it is 60. From this range, you can see this is not the expected range and more failures are happening. And you can change it to warning, and you are change it to okay. Now, what is meant by okay? So if the range is more than, or else I'll go to the chargeback. I think this could be better example. And threshold. So let's consider if the value is less than point, or else this value is less than one, we'll say this is less than the range, and this is critical because we are expecting more. And if it is greater than 2 2, we'll just say we are good. So whenever you have these representation, you can see how much data that you have, and you can see um, how many data is in good condition and bad condition. You can see all these values getting replicated here. So there are additional number of options that you have. Now you have this data everything created. So this is how the data will be getting created, and now you can just give access to your customer this, and they can view this metrics end to end. Now I just wanted to go back to the presentation. Where is my presentation? I just have few points which I thought to cover. Okay. Okay.
Uh, Guys, anyone has any questions or you want understand anything in depth on any of the concepts that Madhu covered so far? I see a question from, I think, Venugopal. What is the backend database we use?
So we use InfluxDB. So as mentioned, so backend Salesforce, MuleSoft will store the data in InfluxDB, and we don't have a control. So the way that we interact with AWS, it's similar. So we push the data, and within the backend, MuleSoft will use Grafana to create this dashboard representation for us.
Yeah, thanks, Madhu. I think Gopal, your question is answered. So, anybody else, any other questions? You can unmute yourself and ask. Okay. We have one question from Jay Dikshit. Would this also add any latency in the APIs?
No. So Dixit, so we won't see any latencies. So what you can do is, let's say, if I go back to my code, so let's consider if you don't want to do this process in the synchronous mode, you just keep this in async mode. So normally it is suggested to keep in the async mode to process this the data where we are whenever you have these metrics information. I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. S-
So, any other questions? Mother, I think you can proceed further.
Okay, thanks for that. So I just wanted to cover few data. So we have created the data and we were discussing about what are the different options to create these dashboards, right? So I wanted to walk through on how the data looks like when we push this data. Okay, so now we have created this custom metrics, right? I'll just log in back to my Cloud Hub. Okay, so now here if you see, right, so we can't go ahead and see whether the data was pushed out to my custom metrics or not. So for this, what we have is you can enable one debugger. So I'll just try to add that debug option here. So if you add these two logging information, so what happens here is we can track all the analytic data which is getting pushed to back end of your application. So once this is done, I'll just try to trigger one record. I'll just trying to push here. So I just stop this. So now if you see here, right? So this is how the data looks like while it is going back to the data. Here you can see metric name, which is business order failure, and facts is order amount. For this facts we have two, one is order amount and fail count, and dimensions we are pushing ERP system, order ID, and fail reasons, right? So this is how actually we can track the logs. Now I just wanted to share you one additional information. Now here if you see, right, so till now we were discussing about how to create the data based on the individual object. So tomorrow there could be a scenario where so we might not be getting the data in an object format, right? We will be getting the data in the array of the objects. So at this scenario, what will happen here is I have created one payload which will take the data and map this. But while pushing this data, we have a logic written. So we'll create into object. So as we can see here, while we are pushing the data to the metric, it will be combination of your facts and dimensions. And in here in this example I have created one dimension. What is the dimension, what is the dimension name, what is the value for this, and what is this collapsible true. So what is this collapsible true means, so as we have discussed initially, right, while we are creating any metric, so this metric would be collection of the different events that are going to happen. So now, if you say collapsible true, it will try to aggregate the data in the backend and store this. And if you don't select this, it would be individual of the data while it's storing the data. And it is suggested to store in the collapsible as true, which will help to retrieve the data based on the indexing in the backend representation. Now, if you see, right, so we have written a similar logic where it will create individual object of value, dimension, and collapsible. And this time here in place of edit in line we'll be passing this complete payload. So now what will happen here is I'll just have one application deployed similarly to push tab. So I have this order. I'll just try to process this, and if I go to the Cloud Hub, I'll just
Mother, can you zoom in?
I'm just trying to zoom in. Yeah. Okay, what is a metric name? Any metric? Yeah. So if you see the metric name which I pushed here is multiple orders. Multiple orders is sample metric name, and here I'll just copy this, and if I go back, how many orders that I have here? So four orders. I should have four metrics created. I think I have ran. I'll just say last hour. So from last 1 hour, we have four orders. The four metrics should get created. And here, if you see, right, so the data got split up individually, and we have created multiple metrics for objects of array as well. So what we do is a similar case where we'll call this in the async flow in the backend, and we'll loop it based on each object and push this data. And for now, we don't have a capability to push all the data at single go. Let's say if you are having array of 100 or 200, we don't have capability of pushing all the data at single go. So this is one of the options that we have, and we can we can proceed with our flow. So for that, I'll just go back to the slides, and yeah, I think additional information we have discussed. And for the code reference, I have updated the similar code with all the different options that we have discussed now and uploaded into this Git repository. You can find this information. And for additional documentation, we have updated few document information, and I think last two will give us more information on how this means of monitoring custom metrics helps in, and this is a MuleSoft help article on how to set up for our hybrid environments, runtime environments, different runtime environments, and how we can monitor this and common issues that we face in this process. And before further going on, so if you have any questions for me, I would be happy to answer those.
Guys, any questions or you want to clarify any other things with Madhu? Take this opportunity. So we'll share these slides and the recording. You will be finding on the event page within 1 or 2 days, so you can access the code as well.
Okay, I have a question. So in you said in built-in customers, right? We see system-related information, CPU usage, and memory
Right.
information, right? And that is specific to your application.
Yes, yes, Jay.
And if I want to bring those information in this via this connector, is it possible in that connector?
So what happens is through this character, we won't pull this data. So I'll try to get that window open once again. Okay, if you can view the screen, let me know. Okay. Okay. So now what happens is the same custom metrics that we have. What you can do is we'll create one similar stats, but here we won't go through that one. Here you have called panel and where exactly your application got deployed. And let's say we were talking about our API. And here you can create your request. Let's say if I want to say, um, so what is my CPU utilization? You can see based on the different time ranges that you have. And as we have discussed, so I think you have options to aggregate the data across. So we'll say count. So this is the worker highest that got utilized, and there are different options. So you can mimic these options, and let's consider you want to fetch uh, similar data, but let's consider you want to get app inbound metric, saying that okay, I'll create a completely new one. It's trying to gather and configure. Now I'll go to the advanced mode, and here if you see inbound metric, right? So based on the average request that you have, this is coming from sandbox, and my app ID is So yeah, so if you see, right, so for different endpoints that you have in, so generate order, array of generate order or generate orders, different time frames that you have. So based on the different combinations that you go ahead and implement this, we can retrieve all the data. So as mentioned, so we can pull out your existing built-in information, built-in dashboard information, as well as this custom metrics. So if I go back, right, so I'll just say discard for now. So as we are discussing about built-in dashboards initially, right, the first step that we have gone through and created this, I'll go back to the same step. Now here you can see all the information. So before you go ahead and create the dashboard, we can see a complete information from here. So what is the CPU utilization, number of messages came in. So here you can see this information and average response time and how many errors that you got and all this. And let's say with respect to the only inbound, if you are interested more, you can get this information. So you can just click on save as from here. The data you can create a custom dashboard. So as mentioned, so it's all combination of the queries that we create that will help us to create these metrics. And while we are pulling the data back to the dashboards, so it's all not representation of what metrics that you have created, but we have a capability to pull up with respect to the performance or platform related as well. I hope I have
I
answered
guess.
you.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Maybe one more question. So,
Sure.
alerts, right? I see these alerts, but these alerts are like already inbuilt rules will be there and it will do some email triggering or notification. But
Okay.
is it something
Hmm.
where I can relate these alerts with the custom dashboard table what we created?
So from here, if you want to create an alert, that's again a different set of scenario.
Hmm.
So I think from custom metrics, you wanted to create alerts. We don't have an option. So what you have an option is from here alerts. What is a similar condition that you have? You go ahead and create an alert. So I think when you're creating alert, so if you are a Titanium subscription, if you have Titanium subscription, we have different options that are available for us. So we can create application level alerts or platform level alerts, different conditions on that.
We'll
And from
see
your
some.
application, it's from our application as well, we have a capability to create alert as well. So similarly, how we are pushing the custom dashboard, we can create alert from your application as well. Altogether, we have different options capability that
Okay.
MuleSoft provides.
Thank you so much.
Jay, like adding on the same note, right? We have custom notification connector and for Studio, so you can use that if you want to send any additional metrics as part of your alerts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, Madhu, we have one more question. Suppose in
Sure.
case of pushing collection of data to target system, looping through each record for metrics might impact performance, right? We have a question from Vijay.
So if we loop, can you repeat it?
Yes. If you are looping data through the target system, right, will
Hmm.
that have any performance impact?
As current examples, so we are going through this example pushing out through ERP systems, but it's depends on the use case that you are currently handling. And for today's session, we wanted to give more detailed information. That's where we try to create one sample, basic example. But when you are dealing with ERP systems, I think based on the business use case, you will have a different scenarios across. And while you're dealing with, let's say, if you are having multiple ERP systems, it might not impact the performance because you need a metrics to deal to get the data from different systems, right? This will be part of our uh, design, but we need to go ahead and see if you are what kind of data that you are pushing in. So as we had discussed, so a series of events get generated, and low cardinality and high cardinality data as we have mentioned. So rather than creating based on thousands of unique data, we should go ahead and create where we have less unique data to filter out this information.
Thanks, Madhu. Vijay, hope your question is answered. So, guys, any other question? We can take last one or two questions. All right, I'll take it as a no. Still, if you want to ask any other questions or if you want to reach out to Madhu, you can get in touch with him through LinkedIn. Hope, Madhu, that's fine with you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy to connect with you. And before handing to Bharat,